The Galactic Council had existed for 17 million years. They had watched stars being born and dying. They had seen empires rise across thousands of worlds and then crumble into dust. They had cataloged over 42,000 intelligent species, and they had developed a system, a perfect system, a system that had never failed them. Until the humans arrived. Ambassador stood before the great viewing screen in the council chamber, his 4 tentacles wrapped tightly around the ceremonial staff of judgment. His species, had been founding members of the council. They were considered the beings in the known universe. They had created the integration protocol, the sacred process by which new species were tested before being allowed to join galactic civilization. The process was simple. Every new species discovered had to prove their worth. They were given a challenge, a task designed to test their capabilities, their intelligence, their will to survive. The survival rate was calculated with mathematical precision. Most species received challenges with survival rates between 60 and 90%. These were civilizations that the Council deemed worthy of joining them. Some species, the more primitive or aggressive ones, received harder challenges. Survival rates of 30 or 40% were not uncommon. These species needed to prove themselves more thoroughly before they could be trusted with galactic technology and knowledge. And then there were the special cases, the dangerous cases, the species that the Council believed posed a threat to galactic peace and order. For these species, the challenges were designed to be nearly impossible. The survival rates dropped to single digits, sometimes even lower. The humans fell into this final category. Remembered the day the scout ships had first returned with their reports about Earth. The small blue planet in an unremarkable solar system had seemed ordinary at first. The inhabitants were primitive by galactic standards, still burning fossil fuels and fighting among themselves over patches of land and outdated belief systems. They had barely reached their own moon. But the psychological profiles had been alarming. The humans possessed a trait that the Council had rarely seen in their millions of years of observation. They called it stubbornness in the official reports, but knew it was something more than that. It was a refusal to accept reality. It was an irrational belief that they could overcome any obstacle, defy any odds, survive any challenge. The Council had debated for 3 standard cycles about what to do with Earth. Some members argued for immediate quarantine, sealing the humans away from the rest of the galaxy forever. Others suggested subtle intervention, guiding human development in safer directions. A few even proposed extinction, though this option was quickly dismissed as barbaric. In the end, they had decided on the integration protocol, but not just any challenge. They had designed the most difficult test in the history of the Council. They had calculated the survival rate with their most advanced prediction algorithms, running the simulation 17 trillion times to ensure accuracy. The number had come back the same every time, 0.001%, 1 in 100,000, virtually impossible. The Council had been satisfied. The humans would fail as they were meant to fail. The galaxy would be safe from their unpredictable nature, their dangerous optimism, their terrifying ability to adapt and overcome. The challenge would eliminate them without the Council having to soil their tentacles with direct violence. That had been 15 standard years ago. Now stood before the viewing screen, his tentacles trembling as he watched the latest transmission from the human expedition. Behind him, the other Council members sat in stunned silence. The great chamber, which had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, had never been so quiet. On the screen, a human female with dark skin and a bright smile was holding up a small rectangular piece of paper. Behind her, could see an impossible landscape. Mountains of crystalline ice rose toward a purple sky streaked with radiation storms. In the distance, massive creatures with hundreds of legs crawled across the frozen plains, creatures that had killed every other species that had ever encountered them. The human female was wearing what appeared to be a light jacket. She should have been frozen solid. She should have been torn apart by the radiation. She should have been devoured by the creatures. Instead, she was smiling. "Greetings from 7," she said, her voice cheerful and relaxed. "The weather's a bit chilly, but the locals are friendly once you get to know them. Wish you were here." She held up the piece of paper closer to the camera. It was decorated with colorful images and text. A postcard, realized. The humans had sent them a postcard. The transmission ended and the chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, the whispers began. The other council members were confused, frightened, and some were even angry. How had this happened? How had the humans survived? Did not join in the whispers. He was too busy remembering the day the challenge had been delivered to Earth. The council had sent their most impressive diplomatic vessel, a ship the size of a small moon, to deliver the news. They had expected the humans to be awed, perhaps even terrified. Instead, the human leaders had listened politely, asked a few questions, and then requested time to discuss the matter among themselves. 3 days later, they had accepted the challenge. Had been present at that meeting. He remembered the human representative, a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. The man had not seemed worried about the survival rate. When had explained that only 1 in 100,000 humans could be expected to survive, the man had simply nodded. "We've faced worse odds," he had said. "We'll figure it out." Had thought the man was delusional. He had assumed it was simply human ignorance, their inability to comprehend the true danger they faced. The challenge the council had designed was comprehensive. The humans would be transported to 7, a death world in the outer rim, and left there for 10 standard years. They would have to survive the extreme cold, the toxic atmosphere, the deadly radiation, and the hostile native life forms. They would be given no advanced technology, no weapons, no protective equipment, just their own minds and bodies. The council had sent 100,000 humans to 7. They had expected to receive 0 survivors. Instead, after 10 years, they had received a postcard. And not just one postcard. As would soon learn, the humans had sent postcards from every corner of 7. They had explored the entire planet. They had mapped its geography, studied its creatures, and somehow, impossibly, they had thrived. The next transmission arrived 3 days later. This time, it was a human male with pale skin and red hair. He was standing on the edge of a volcanic crater, molten rock bubbling behind him. The heat should have killed him instantly. "Hey there, council folks," he said, waving at the camera. "Just checking out the hot springs here on the southern continent. Bit warm for my taste, but the sunsets are amazing. Sending you some pictures." More postcards appeared on the screen. Pictures of humans swimming in acidic lakes. Pictures of humans climbing mountains made of razor-sharp crystal. Pictures of humans riding on the backs of the massive creatures that had killed dozens of other species. Felt his heart sink. The council had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that the humans would react to 7 the same way every other species had reacted. They had expected fear, desperation, and ultimately, death. They had not anticipated this. The humans were not just surviving, they were having fun. The council called an emergency session to discuss the situation. Representatives from all 42,000 member species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices raised in confusion and concern. How had the humans done it? What was their secret? Was tasked with investigating. He spent weeks analyzing every piece of data from 7, every transmission, every image, every scrap of information the humans had sent back. What he discovered changed everything he thought he knew about the universe. The humans had not relied on any single strategy. They had not found one solution to the challenges of 7. Instead, they had found thousands of solutions, millions of solutions. Each human, it seemed, had approached the problem differently, and somehow their collective creativity had been enough. Some humans had focused on technology. Without advanced equipment, they had built their own. Using nothing but rocks and plants and the bodies of dead creatures, they had constructed shelters, weapons, and tools. They had discovered that the crystalline ice could be processed into a material stronger than any known alloy. They had learned that certain native plants could neutralize the toxic atmosphere when burned in specific ways. Other humans had focused on biology. They had studied the native creatures with obsessive attention, learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their behaviors. Within the first year, they had domesticated 3 species that had never been domesticated by any civilization in galactic history. The massive creatures that had killed so many others were now being used as transportation and protection. Still, other humans had focused on social organization. They had built communities, established trade networks, and created systems of governance that allowed them to coordinate their efforts across the entire planet. They had shared knowledge freely, teaching each other what they had learned, building on each other's discoveries. But the most remarkable thing, the thing that truly baffled, was their attitude. The humans did not act like they were struggling to survive. They acted like they were on vacation. They told jokes, they threw parties, they celebrated birthdays and holidays and achievements both large and small. They fell in love, got married, and had children. They created art, wrote music, and told stories. They built libraries and schools and theaters. On a world designed to kill them, the humans had built a civilization. Presented his findings to the council, but the other members did not want to hear it. They accused him of exaggerating, of being corrupted by human influence, of making mistakes in his analysis. Some even suggested that the transmissions were fake, elaborate deceptions created by the humans to hide their true suffering. But knew the truth. The transmissions were real, the humans had really survived, and now the council had a problem. According to the integration protocol, any species that successfully completed their challenge had to be admitted to galactic civilization. They would gain access to faster-than-light travel, advanced medical technology, and all the other benefits of council membership. They would become equals, with voting rights and diplomatic representation. The council had never expected the humans to reach this point. They had designed the challenge specifically to prevent it, but the rules were clear, and the council prided itself on following the rules. For the first time in 17 million years, the integration protocol had been beaten. The debate raged for months. Some council members argued that the rules should be changed, that exceptions should be made, that the humans were too dangerous to be allowed into galactic civilization. Others pointed out that changing the rules after the fact would undermine the entire foundation of the council, would make them no better than the primitive species they claimed to govern. In the end, the traditionalists won. The humans would be admitted, the rules would be followed. But before the official ceremonies could begin, the council sent one final delegation to 7. They needed to understand how the humans had done it. They needed to learn the secret of their survival. Was chosen to lead the delegation. He had spent more time studying the humans than any other council member. If anyone could get answers, it was him. The journey to 7 took 3 standard weeks. When the diplomatic vessel finally entered orbit, spent hours simply staring at trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what he knew about the planet. 7 had been transformed. The frozen wastelands were dotted with settlements, connected by roads and trails that had been carved through the ice. The volcanic regions had been converted into geothermal power plants. The acidic lakes had been drained or neutralized, and in their place, farms were growing food. The humans had not just survived, they had conquered. The landing party touched down near the largest settlement, a sprawling city of ice and stone and processed crystal, and his team were greeted by a committee of human leaders who welcomed them with warm smiles and firm handshakes. "Ambassador," said the woman at the head of the committee, recognized her from the first postcard transmission. Her name was Doctor, and she had been elected the leader of the human settlement 2 years ago. "We've been expecting you. Come, let us show you around." The tour lasted 3 days. The humans showed everything. They showed him their homes, their schools, their farms, their factories. They showed him their art galleries and their sports arenas and their research laboratories. They showed him the massive creatures they had tamed and the plants they had cultivated and the tools they had built. And everywhere they went, the humans smiled and laughed and told stories. They seemed genuinely happy to see. They seemed proud of what they had accomplished. They seemed completely unaware of the fact that they had done something that should have been impossible. On the final day of the tour, sat down with Doctor for a private conversation. He needed answers. The council needed answers. The entire galaxy needed to understand how the humans had the odds. "How did you do it?" asked, his translator rendering his words into the human language. "How did you survive? Our calculations predicted a success rate of 1 in 100,000. You should all be dead." Doctor smiled. It was a gentle smile, patient and understanding, the kind of smile a teacher might give to a student who has asked a naive question. "Ambassador," she said, "I think there might be a problem with your calculations." His tentacles twitched in confusion. "Our calculations are never wrong. We ran the simulation 17 trillion times." "I'm sure you did," Doctor said, "but I think you might have been calculating the wrong thing." "What do you mean?" Doctor leaned forward, her eyes bright with something that could not quite identify. Later, he would realize it was pity. "You calculated the odds of an individual human surviving 7, she said. "That was your first mistake. Humans don't survive as individuals. We survive as a group. We survive together." Considered this. Our models accounted for social cooperation. It did not significantly change the results. "That's because cooperation isn't what makes us different," Doctor said. "What makes us different is that we refuse to accept the odds. We look at a situation that should be impossible and we say, let's try anyway. We don't calculate our chances. We just do what needs to be done." Was silent for a moment. He had heard similar things before, in the psychological profiles and the cultural analyses. But hearing it from a human, sitting across from someone who had actually lived through the impossible, was different. "That doesn't make sense," he finally said. "Refusing to accept the odds doesn't change the odds." Doctor laughed. It was a warm sound full of genuine amusement. "Ambassador, with all due respect, that's exactly what it does. Your calculations assumed that we would behave rationally, that we would make decisions based on logic and probability. But humans don't work that way. We're not rational. We're stubborn." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "When you told us that only 1 in 100,000 would survive, we didn't hear that as a prediction. We heard it as a challenge. We looked at that number and we said, 'Watch us.'" Felt something cold settle in his stomach. He was beginning to understand, and what he understood frightened him. "You're saying that you changed the outcome by refusing to accept it." "I'm saying that the outcome was never what you thought it was," Doctor replied. "You saw a survival rate. We saw a problem to solve, and humans are very, very good at solving problems." The conversation continued for several more hours, but's mind was already racing ahead. He was thinking about the implications of what Doctor had said. He was thinking about what it meant for the Council, for the galaxy, for the entire framework of civilization that had stood for 17 million years. The humans had not cheated. They had not found some secret loophole in the challenge. They had simply refused to accept that they were supposed to fail, and somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. When returned to the Council with his report, the reaction was not what he expected. He had anticipated fear, anger, perhaps even panic. Instead, he found resignation. The other council members had been doing their own research while he was away. They had been studying human history, human psychology, human culture, and they had all come to the same conclusion. The humans were not an aberration. They were not a mistake. They were something the Council had never encountered before. They were a species that simply refused to give up. Throughout their history, the humans had faced countless challenges that should have destroyed them. Wars, plagues, famines, natural disasters. They had been conquered and enslaved and oppressed. They had been pushed to the brink of extinction more times than anyone could count. And every single time, they had come back stronger. The Council had thought they were dealing with just another primitive species, one that could be tested and categorized and controlled. They had been wrong. The humans were something different, something unprecedented, something that could not be predicted or contained. As stood before the great viewing screen once more, watching as the human delegation arrived for their official admission to galactic civilization, he felt a strange mixture of emotions. There was fear, certainly. The humans were unpredictable and dangerous, and their presence in the galaxy would change everything. But there was also something else, something that surprised him. There was hope. For 17 million years, the Council had maintained order through control. They had categorized and tested and managed every species in the galaxy. They had created a stable civilization, but it was also a stagnant one. Nothing new ever happened. Nothing ever changed. The humans were going to change everything. They were going to bring chaos and uncertainty and risk. But they were also going to bring something that the galaxy had been missing for a very long time. They were going to bring possibility. As the human delegation entered the Great Chamber, notice something in the hands of the lead representative. It was a stack of small rectangular papers, decorated with colorful images and text. Postcards. The human smiled and began distributing them to the council members. Each postcard showed a different scene from 7, mountains and volcanoes and frozen plains, humans working and playing and building, a civilization born from the impossible. Looked down at the postcard in his tentacles. On the back, someone had written a message in neat human script. Thanks for the challenge, looking forward to the next one. For the first time in his very long life, found himself smiling. The humans were here. The galaxy would never be the same. And somehow that felt like exactly what it needed. 5 standard years had passed since the humans joined the Galactic Council. In that time, everything had predicted had come true. The galaxy was changing. The old order was crumbling, and the humans were at the center of all of it. But not in the way the Council had feared. Stood at the observation window of his private quarters, watching as a fleet of human trading ships docked at the orbital station. The ships were crewed by galactic standards, cobbled together from salvaged parts and human ingenuity. They should not have been able to travel between stars. They certainly should not have been able to compete with the sleek, efficient vessels of the established trading guilds. And yet somehow they were thriving. The humans had discovered something that the Council had forgotten long ago. They had discovered that efficiency was not the only thing that mattered. Speed was not the only measure of success. Sometimes, the most important thing was simply being willing to go where others would not. The human traders went everywhere. They visited worlds that had been abandoned by the major guilds because they were too dangerous or too poor or too far away. They traded with species that had been isolated for centuries, bringing them goods and news and connection to the wider galaxy. They took risks that no rational being would take, and more often than not, those risks paid off. His communications panel chimed. He turned away from the window and accepted the incoming message. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to High Counselor Na, the current leader of the Galactic Council. "Ambassador," she said, her voice tight with barely contained frustration. "We have another situation." Sighed, there was always another situation these days. What have the humans done now? They've entered the void territories. Felt his tentacles go rigid. The void territories were the most dangerous region in the known galaxy. They were a collection of star systems that had been corrupted by an ancient catastrophe, filled with deadly radiation, unstable wormholes, and something worse. Something that no species had ever been able to identify or explain. Ships that entered the void territories did not come back. Probes sent to investigate went silent. Even automated drones, designed with every possible protection, failed within hours of crossing the boundary. The Council had declared the void territories off-limits thousands of years ago, and that declaration had never been questioned. Until now. How many humans? Asked. 17 ships, Na replied. Approximately 2,000 individuals. They departed from the system 3 cycles ago, heading directly for the void boundary. Have we received any communication from them? Yes. Na's expression shifted, becoming something that had never seen on her face before. Confusion mixed with disbelief mixed with something that might have been wonder. They sent us a message this morning. I'm forwarding it to you now. The screen flickered, and then a new face appeared. Recognized Captain Sarah, one of the most famous human explorers. She was known throughout the galaxy for her impossible expeditions, her refusal to accept limitations, and her collection of postcards from places no other being had ever visited. "Hey there, Council folks," she said, her voice cheerful despite the static that crackled through the transmission. "Just wanted to let you know that we've made it into the void territories. The radiation is pretty intense, but our shielding is holding. The wormholes are actually really beautiful once you get used to them, and we've found something interesting." The camera shifted, and found himself looking at something that made his heart stop. It was a structure, a massive structure, hanging in the darkness between stars. It was clearly artificial, constructed by some intelligence, but its design was unlike anything had ever seen. It was covered in symbols and markings that seemed to shift and change as he watched them. "We're not sure what it is yet," Captain continued, "but it looks old, really old, like older than the Council old. We're going to take a closer look. I'll send you another postcard when we figure out what's going on. Don't wait up." The transmission ended. Sat in silence for a long moment, trying to process what he had just seen. The void territories had been impassable for thousands of years. Every species that had tried to explore them had failed. And yet the humans had not only entered the region, they had found something that the entire galaxy had given up on discovering. His communications panel chimed again. Na's face reappeared. "The Council is convening an emergency session," she said. "Your presence is required." Nodded. "I'll be there shortly." The emergency session lasted for 3 standard days. The Council members argued and debated and accused each other of various failures. Some blamed for allowing the humans to join the Council in the first place. Others blamed the traditionalists for not changing the rules when they had the chance. A few even blamed the humans themselves, though it was difficult to articulate exactly what crime they had committed. Throughout all of this, more transmissions arrived from the void territories. Captain and her crew were documenting everything they found. The ancient structure turned out to be just the beginning. Beyond it, they discovered ruins of a civilization that had existed long before the Council was formed. They found technology that explanation, artifacts that seemed to operate on principles unknown to galactic science, and records of a history that no one had ever known existed. The humans shared everything they discovered. They sent detailed reports, images, samples, and analysis. They asked for nothing in return except the freedom to continue their exploration. "They're insane," said Counselor, representative of the Dominion. "They're going to get themselves killed." "They've been saying that about humans since they arrived," pointed out, "and yet they're still here." "This is different. The void territories are not like 7. We don't even know what killed all the previous expeditions. How can the humans protect themselves from something they don't understand?" Thought about this question for a long time. It was a good question. It was the question that the entire Council was asking. How were the humans surviving in a place that should have killed them? The answer came a week later, in another transmission from Captain. "Okay, so we figured out what was killing everyone," she said. Her face was streaked with dirt and her hair was tangled, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Turns out it's some kind of ancient defense system. The previous civilization built it to protect their territory from invaders. It targets any vessel that approaches with hostile intent or with the goal of exploitation." She grinned, the kind of wild, reckless grin that had come to associate with humans who were about to say something extraordinary. "The thing is, we didn't come here to invade or exploit. We came because we were curious. We came because we wanted to see what was here, and apparently the defense system can tell the difference. It let us through because we didn't mean any harm." Stared at the screen. It was such a simple explanation, and yet it explained everything. The Council had sent expeditions to the Void territories with clear objectives: claim territory, acquire resources, establish dominance. Every expedition had been motivated by the same goals that had driven galactic expansion for millions of years. The humans had come with no objectives at all. They had come simply because they wanted to know what was there. It was the same thing that had happened on 7. The Council had designed the challenge as a test, a way to eliminate a dangerous species. The humans had approached it as an adventure, a problem to solve, an opportunity to learn. The difference in mindset had changed everything. Over the following months, the human expedition in the Void territories made discovery after discovery. They found that the ancient civilization had called themselves the Architects, and they had been the first intelligent species to achieve faster-than-light travel. They had explored the entire galaxy millions of years before the Council existed, and they had left behind a network of installations and artifacts that had been waiting all this time to be rediscovered. The Architects had eventually ascended to a higher plane of existence, leaving their technology behind as a gift for whoever came after them. But they had built the defense system to ensure that this gift would only go to beings who deserved it. Beings who approached with curiosity rather than conquest. Beings who valued knowledge over power. Beings like the humans. The Council was forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about the galaxy. The expansion policies that had guided them for millions of years were called into question. The competitive mindset that had defined relationships between species was challenged. The entire structure of galactic civilization was suddenly up for debate. And through all of this, the humans kept sending postcards. They sent postcards from the ruins of architect cities that had stood empty for longer than life had existed on most worlds. They sent postcards from chambers filled with technology that could reshape matter at the atomic level. They sent postcards from observation posts where the architects had watched the birth of stars. Each postcard carried the same message, written in different words but always meaning the same thing. "We're here. We're doing fine. Wish you could see this." Began to collect the postcards. He pinned them to the wall of his quarters, a growing gallery of impossible achievements. 7. The Void territories. Dozens of other locations where humans had gone and done things that should not have been possible. Other council members started doing the same thing. It became a trend, a fashion, a statement. Having human postcards on display was a sign that you understood something that most beings did not. It meant you recognized that the old ways of thinking were changing, and you were willing to change with them. 3 more years passed. The human population in the galaxy grew as Earth opened its borders and encouraged its people to explore the stars. Human settlements sprang up on hundreds of worlds, each one unique, each one reflecting the particular interests and passions of its founders. There was a human colony on a world of perpetual storms, where the inhabitants had learned to harvest lightning for power. There was a human station in the heart of a nebula, where artists created sculptures from clouds of ionized gas. There was a human city built entirely underwater, on a planet where the surface was too toxic to inhabit. Wherever there was a challenge, there were humans racing to meet it. Watched all of this with a mixture of amazement and growing understanding. He had spent decades studying the humans, trying to figure out what made them different. And finally, after all this time, he thought he understood. The humans were not special because of their biology. They were not stronger or faster or smarter than other species. In many ways, they were actually quite limited. Their bodies were fragile. They were short. Their senses were dull compared to many other beings. But they had something that no other species possessed. They had an absolute, unshakable belief that they could overcome any obstacle. They looked at impossible situations and refused to see them as impossible. They treated challenges not as threats but as opportunities. And because they believed they could succeed, they found ways to succeed. It was not rational. It did not make sense according to the cold logic of probability and statistics, but it worked. Somehow, impossibly, it worked. The realization changed. He began to question the assumptions that had guided his entire life. He began to wonder if the Council's way of thinking, with its careful calculations and risk assessments, had been holding the galaxy back. He began to imagine what might be possible if other species adopted the human mindset. He was not alone in this questioning. Across the galaxy, beings of all kinds were watching the humans and asking themselves the same questions. The old certainties were crumbling. New ideas were taking their place. The humans, typically, did not notice any of this. They were too busy exploring, building, discovering, and creating. They did not realize that they were transforming galactic civilization simply by being themselves. They did not understand that their refusal to accept limitations was inspiring others to question their own limitations. They just kept sending postcards. 10 years after the humans joined the Council, received a personal invitation. It came from Dr., the woman who had led the human settlement on Seven, and who was now one of the most respected figures in galactic politics. The invitation was simple. Doctor was organizing an expedition to a region beyond the edge of the known galaxy, a place that no being had ever visited. She wanted to come along. "I think it's time you saw things from our perspective," the message said. "I think it's time you understood what it feels like to face the impossible." Accepted without hesitation. He had spent his entire career observing and analyzing. Now he wanted to participate. The expedition launched a month later. The crew was a mixture of humans and other species, all of them volunteers, all of them united by a single shared belief. The belief that the impossible was just another word for not yet achieved. The journey took them through regions of space that had never been mapped, past phenomena that scientific explanation, into territories that should have been unreachable. At every step, expected disaster. At every step, the humans found a way through. They encountered gravitational anomalies that should have torn the ship apart. The engineers improvised a solution using spare parts and creative mathematics. They passed through clouds of exotic matter that should have dissolved their hull. The scientists discovered that the matter could be neutralized with a specific frequency of light. They faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, and every time, someone found an answer. Began to understand what Doctor had been trying to show him. It was not about being smart or strong or lucky. It was about refusing to give up. It was about looking at a problem from every angle until you found something that worked. It was about believing that a solution existed even when all evidence suggested otherwise. 6 months into the expedition, they reached their destination. It was a small planet orbiting a dim star at the very edge of the void between galaxies. According to all models and predictions, nothing should have existed here. The conditions for planet formation did not exist this far from any galactic center. And yet here it was, a world covered in forests and oceans and mountains, a world teeming with life. The landing party found ruins there. Not ruins of the architects this time, but something else, something older, something that predated everything the Council had ever discovered. Among the ruins, they found a message. It had been left there by whoever had built this place, waiting for anyone who managed to reach it. The message was written in a language that no translation system could decipher, but somehow, everyone who looked at it understood its meaning. You have come far. You have done what should not be possible. You have proven that you are worthy of knowing the truth. The truth, as it turned out, was bigger than anyone could have imagined. The galaxy was just one small part of a much larger structure. There were billions of galaxies beyond, each one filled with wonders waiting to be discovered. And the beings who had left this message had traveled all of it, millions of years ago, before ascending to something beyond physical existence. They had left their knowledge behind, hidden in places that could only be reached by those who refused to accept limitations. Places like the void territories, places like this world at the edge of everything. The humans had found the first key, now they were finding the second. Stood among the ruins, surrounded by his human companions, and felt tears forming in his eyes. He was not sad. He was overwhelmed by the vastness of the universe, overwhelmed by the possibilities that lay ahead, overwhelmed by the simple fact that he was here, witnessing this moment, participating in this discovery. Doctor walked up beside him. She was smiling, but there was something deeper in her expression, something that went beyond simple happiness. "Do you understand now?" she asked softly. Nodded. "I think I do. You don't calculate the odds because the odds don't matter. What matters is that you try." "That's part of it," Doctor agreed, "but there's more to it than that." "What do you mean?" Doctor looked out at the alien landscape, at the impossible world that should not exist but did. We don't just try because we want to succeed. We try because the trying itself is valuable. Every attempt teaches us something. Every failure brings us closer to success, and every success opens the door to new challenges. She turned to face directly. "The Council saw our survival rate and thought it was a death sentence. We saw it and thought it was an invitation to push ourselves harder than we ever had before, an invitation to discover what we were truly capable of." "And what are you truly capable of?" asked. Doctor smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in that first postcard from 15 years and a lifetime ago. "We don't know yet," she said. "That's the whole point, we're still finding out." The expedition returned to Council space a year later, carrying knowledge and artifacts that would take centuries to fully understand. The discoveries changed everything. They opened up new frontiers of exploration, new fields of science, new possibilities for every species in the galaxy. And through all of it, the humans kept being humans. They kept taking risks. They kept refusing to accept impossible odds. They kept pushing into unknown territories and coming back with stories and discoveries and, of course, postcards. Retired from his position on the Council shortly after the expedition returned. He had served for long enough. It was time to let younger beings take over, beings who had grown up in this new era of possibility. But he did not stop collecting postcards. He received them from all over the galaxy, from humans he had met and humans he had never known. Postcards from the edge of black holes and the hearts of dying stars. Postcards from worlds that had been declared impossible and from regions that had been marked as forbidden. Postcards that proved, again and again, that the universe was bigger and more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined. Each postcard was a reminder that the impossible was just a word, a reminder that limitations existed only in the mind, a reminder that sometimes the only thing standing between you and success was your willingness to try. On the wall of his home, the collection grew until it covered every surface. Thousands of postcards from thousands of impossible places, a testament to human stubbornness, human creativity, and human refusal to give up. And in the center of it all, framed in a place of honor, was the very first postcard he had ever received. The one from Seven, from that first impossible survival, from the moment when everything began to change. Greetings from Seven. The weather's a bit chilly, but the locals are friendly once you get to know them. Wish you were here. Looked at that postcard every day. It reminded him of the most important lesson he had ever learned. When the universe tells you that something is impossible, the correct response is not to accept it. The correct response is to try anyway. And maybe, just maybe, send a postcard to let everyone know how it went. The humans had changed the galaxy. They had done it not through force or superior technology, but through something far more powerful. They had done it through sheer, stubborn, wonderful refusal to accept that anything was truly impossible. And they were just getting started. Somewhere out there, beyond the edge of everything anyone knew, new challenges were waiting. New impossibilities were ready to be. New postcards were ready to be written. The humans were already on their way. They always were.